Picture this. It's 1942, and you're surrounded by pitch-black darkness. The only thing you can hear is the faint, whistling sound of a freezing winter wind. Then, out of nowhere, the night is completely shattered by a massive explosion. If you were a terrified German soldier looking up at the sky right now, you'd be absolutely paralyzed by this mysterious sound in the dark. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking one of the most incredible, terrifying, and just flat-out unbelievable underdog military stories in history. So to set the stage, it's 1942 and the Nazi war machine is relentlessly advancing into the Soviet Union, pretty much crushing everything in its path. But here's the crazy part. Despite all their massive firepower and elite training, these soldiers developed a very specific, crippling fear. And no, they weren't afraid of massive Allied bombers or heavy artillery. They were terrified of this quiet, swooshing sound in the dark, a sound they swore sounded exactly like a witch's broomstick sweeping through the night air. The Germans actually coined a name for whatever was making the sound. They called them the Nachthexen, which translates to the night witches. But get this, these feared monsters haunting the German camps overnight, they weren't monsters at all. They were an all-female Soviet bomber regiment, and some of these pilots were literally girls as young as 17 years old. It sets up the ultimate David versus Goliath story, right? Teenage girls taking on what seemed like an unstoppable military force and winning. Okay, let's dive into Chapter 1, The Worst Planes on Earth. To really wrap our heads around the sheer bravery of these women, we have to look at the staggering equipment gap they faced when they were finally allowed to fly in combat. It's almost comical. On one side, you've got the male pilots flying state-of-the-art metal fighter planes. On the other side, the women of the newly formed 588th Regiment were handed Polikarpov Po-2 biplanes. Now, these were not advanced war machines by any stretch. They were literally 1920s crop dusters made entirely out of plywood and canvas. So let's completely strip away whatever expectations you have about military aircraft. These planes had no radios, no radar, no guns, and incredibly, no parachutes. Yeah, you heard that right. The planes were so flimsy that adding extra weight like parachutes would just slow them down too much. Plus, they had open cockpits. That means these young women were flying through freezing Russian winters with sub-zero winds just whipping across their bare faces. And if they took a hit from even a single tracer bullet, because they were made of canvas, the whole plane would ignite like a matchstick. They were essentially flying freezing open-air wooden coffins. Which brings us to Chapter 2, the broomstick tactic. Look, flying these fragile wooden planes during the day would have been a straight-up suicide mission. So they made this absolutely brilliant, albeit risky, decision to fly exclusively in the pitch black of night. But that definitely didn't make the job easy. Because these crop dusters could only carry 2 tiny bombs at a time, they had to fly constantly just to make an actual dent in the enemy lines. 18. A single pilot might fly up to 18 grueling missions in one single night. That meant dropping their payload, flying back, landing in total darkness to rearm, and then immediately taking right back off into the freezing black sky. So how on earth did they survive this? Well, they executed a genius stealth strategy that became known as the broomstick maneuver. Here's how it worked. Step 1, they descend to their target altitude under the cover of total darkness. Step 2 is where it gets wild. To avoid being heard by German anti-aircraft guns, they would completely cut their engines in midair, just kill the power entirely. Then, step 3, they would glide silently to the target and drop their bombs with pinpoint accuracy. The only warning the Germans ever got was that eerie sound of the wind rushing over those canvas wings, the exact sound that birthed the legend of the witch's broomstick. Moving on to Chapter 3, Earning the Iron Cross. Now, I want you to shift your perspective back to those German camps for a second. Imagine the utter humiliation felt by these elite, battle-hardened soldiers. They're being kept awake all night and, frankly, blown to pieces by teenagers flying wooden crop dusters. The German command was so furious, their frustration reached such a boiling point that they issued a stunning decree. They declared that any German pilot who shoots down a night witch will automatically be awarded the Iron Cross. I mean, they were offering one of Nazi Germany's absolute highest military honors just to stop these wooden planes. That is how terrifying and deeply effective these young women actually were. Now, what's really fascinating about this is the aerodynamic mismatch that made shooting them down so incredibly difficult. It's a crazy quirk of physics. The maximum speed of that wooden Po-2 biplane was actually slower than the stall speed of the state-of-the-art German fighter planes. Think about how counterintuitive that is in the sky. If a German pilot tried to slow his advanced fighter jet down enough to actually line up a shot on a night witch, his own engine would stall out and his plane would drop right out of the sky. The sheer slowness of that crop duster literally became an invincible shield for them. And that leads us to Chapter 4, An Unbelievable Legacy. As we bring this explainer toward the end of the war, we can bring this epic underdog narrative to its statistically staggering conclusion. 30,000. That is the total number of missions flown by the Night Witches by the end of the war. It's just an unbelievable statistic that really shows the immense, relentless scale of their contribution. Night after night, flight after flight, engine cut after engine cut, in the freezing cold. And all of that monumental effort translated into 23,000 tons of explosives dropped directly onto the German army. It is honestly hard to even wrap your head around the sheer scale of destruction unleashed by airplanes that were, for all intents and purposes, basically made of paper and canvas. So the crucial takeaway here is their enduring legacy. Despite flying wooden coffins, having no radar, no guns, no parachutes, despite having literally every single odds stacked against them, they became the most highly decorated female unit in the entire Soviet Air Force. 23 of these incredible pilots were awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. The Nazi war machine thought their biggest nightmare was going to be an unstoppable modern military force. But in reality, it was a group of fearless young women gliding through the dark in wooden planes. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final provocative question to think about. What perceived disadvantage could actually become your greatest strength? The Night Witches looked at slow, outdated wooden crop dusters and found a way to use those exact flaws to become untouchable legends of the night sky. Think about how that brilliant reframing might apply to the obstacles in your own life. Thank you so much for exploring this amazing piece of history with us today, and I'll see you in the next explainer.